The Bentley rolled to a smooth stop at the edge of the park, its black paint gleaming under the afternoon sun. Inside, Eleanor Hastings adjusted her sunglasses and glanced at her daughter. 20 more minutes, Emily, she said. Then we need to head back. I have a board call. Emily, 6 years old and already opinionated, pouted in her booster seat. But Mum, I like this park. It's not like the other ones. Eleanor sighed. She was a billionaire CEO of a global tech company. She wasn't used to her schedule being dictated by anyone, let alone her tiny daughter. But there was something about Emily's insistence that always softened her. Fine, Eleanor said. 25. Emily cheered and bounded out of the car, her curls bouncing as she ran toward the swings. Eleanor followed more slowly, heels clicking against the pavement, already drafting mental notes for her upcoming meeting. But then she noticed something unusual. Near the far bench, under the shade of a sycamore tree, a boy sat cross-legged on the grass. His clothes were worn, his sneakers frayed, his hair messy but clean. He was maybe 12 or 13, holding a battered notebook in his lap, and Emily was sitting beside him. Eleanor's heart lurched. She hurried over, ready to scold Emily for talking to strangers, but stopped short when she heard the boy's voice. So if you carry the 1, you get 12. That's how fractions work. Emily giggled. You're better at explaining than my teacher. Eleanor froze. The boy was teaching her daughter math, not just teaching patiently, kindly, with a focus she hadn't seen in any of the high-praised tutors she'd hired. She cleared her throat. Emily, who's your new friend? The boy looked up. His eyes were sharp, intelligent hand, far older than his years. My name's Daniel, ma'am, he said quietly. I was just helping. Eleanor studied him. His clothes weren't just casual, were threadbare. His backpack was patched with duct tape, and when she glanced around, she noticed a thin blanket tucked behind the bench, along with a small plastic bag of belongings. Realization hit her like a stone. He wasn't just a boy in the park, he was homeless, and yet here he was teaching her daughter as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Eleanor Hastings, who had built empires and silenced boardrooms, found herself speechless. For the rest of the afternoon, Eleanor sat on the bench, pretending to scroll through her phone while secretly watching Daniel and Emily. He wasn't just teaching her numbers, he was patient with her questions. He encouraged her when she stumbled, and when Emily proudly got the right answer, he clapped, like it was the greatest victory in the world. Something inside Eleanor twisted. She had built her life on numbers, profit margins, valuations, interest rates, but when had she last seen joy in learning them? When Emily finally ran off to the swings, Eleanor took her chance. Daniel, is it? She asked. Yes, ma'am. He straightened, suddenly wary. You explain fractions better than any tutor I've hired, she said carefully. Where did you learn that? A flicker of pride crossed his face. Books, library mostly. Sometimes YouTube, when I can get Wi-Fi. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. And you just spend your afternoons teaching math to strangers' kids? Daniel shrugged. Not usually. But your daughter asked for help. I didn't think it was wrong. Eleanor studied him. Every instinct told her this was unusual, maybe even dangerous. She had always been cautious about strangers, but there was something in Daniel's tone. Calm, measured, honest. She lowered her voice. Where are your parents? For the first time, his confidence faltered. His eyes dropped to the grass. They're not around. Not around, she pressed. He hesitated, then gave the smallest shake of his head. It's just me. Her stomach tightened. Alone. A boy, barely 13, living on park benches, surviving in libraries and scraps of wi-fi. Emily bounded back over before Eleanor could speak again. Mommy, Daniel's going to teach me division tomorrow. Can we come back, please? Eleanor's mouth opened, then closed. She was a billionaire. She could buy anything, fix anything, build anything. But this was different. This was a human being, a child, surviving in a world she had the power to ignore. And for the first time in a long while, Eleanor didn't know what the right move was. Do nothing and her daughter would forget in a week. Step in, and her entire life and his could change forever. The chauffeur pulled the car around. Emily hopped in, still chattering about fractions. But Eleanor lingered by the curb, looking back at Daniel. He was sitting again under the sycamore tree, notebook in hand, pencil worn down to the nub. A boy with no home, no family, no safety net, and yet more dignity and determination than most executives she knew. For the rest of the night, as she sat in her glass-walled penthouse, Eleanor couldn't shake the image. Daniel's eyes, Daniel's voice, Daniel's quiet resilience, and she whispered to herself, almost against her will, what if I don't ignore him? The next afternoon, Eleanor found herself driving back to the park. It wasn't on her schedule. It wasn't even near her office. But somehow, between conference calls and boardroom arguments, she had made time. Emily had been ecstatic when Eleanor told her they were going again. Daniel promised to teach me long division today, she chirped, swinging her legs in the back seat. When they arrived, Daniel was already there. Same tree, same notebook, same duct-taped backpack at his side. He looked up, cautious but not surprised. He came back. Emily didn't wait for permission. She dropped her bag and sat, cross-legged in front of him. Okay, show me how to split 100 into sevens. Eleanor watched them for a few minutes, but her mind was elsewhere. She had spent the night researching child homelessness. The statistics horrified her. Shelters overflowing, families broken apart, thousands of children slipping through the cracks, and now one of those statistics had a face, a voice, a name. When Emily ran off to the slide, Eleanor finally sat down beside him. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" He hesitated. "Sure." She adjusted her sunglasses, trying to keep her tone neutral. "What do you want out of life? I mean, what's your dream?" The boy blinked, caught off guard. Then, slowly, he said, "I want to go to school again. A real one, not just sneaking into libraries. I want to, I don't know, become something, a teacher, maybe, or an engineer." His voice cracked at the last word, as if he didn't quite believe it himself. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Then she said the words that would change both their lives. "What if I could help you?" Daniel stiffened. "Help me? How?" She leaned in, her voice low. "I could hire you as Emily's tutor. Not just here in the park, but at my home. You'd be paid. You'd have food, a safe place to study, maybe even a chance." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. Hope flickered in his eyes, bright and raw before it slammed shut again. "Why would you do that for me?" he asked sharply. Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't used to justifying herself. In her world, people bent to her will without question. But this boy demanded honesty. "Because you've already taught my daughter more in 2 afternoons than anyone else has in months," she said simply. "Because you're brilliant. And because I don't believe kids like you should be left invisible." Daniel swallowed hard. His hands gripped the notebook until his knuckles went white. "I don't need charity," he muttered. "It's not charity," Eleanor replied firmly. "It's a job, one you're already good at. Take a tour. Don't. The choice is yours." Emily came running back, sand in her shoes and excitement in her eyes. "Daniel, did you tell Mummy you're coming to our house? You have to say yes." Daniel looked between them at Emily's innocent hope, at Eleanor's unflinching gaze, and something in him cracked. "All right," he whispered. "I'll try." Eleanor allowed herself the smallest smile. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a deal. But it was a beginning, and she had no idea just how much this beginning would change everything. The car ride was silent. Daniel sat stiffly in the back of the Bentley, his patched backpack clutched to his chest. Every bump in the road made him flinch. Emily, on the other hand, was bubbling with excitement, chattering about how he'd love their house, how he'd totally get to meet Mr. Whiskers the cat, and how the kitchen had so many snacks. "You won't believe it." Eleanor said nothing. She was watching Daniel carefully out of the corner of her eye. For all his intelligence and confidence when teaching, here he looked small, nervous, like someone waiting for the ground to fall out from beneath him. When the gates of the Hastings estate swung open, Daniel's jaw actually dropped. The driveway seemed to stretch forever, lined with fountains and manicured hedges, and at the end sat a mansion, white stone, towering windows. A house so large it looked more like a museum. He muttered under his breath, "This isn't a house. It's a castle." Emily giggled. "Told you." Inside, the butler greeted them at the door, bowing slightly. "Welcome home, madam." His eyes flicked to Daniel, and though he said nothing, the look was clear. "He doesn't belong here." Eleanor ignored it. "This is Daniel. He'll be spending time with Emily as her tutor." The butler's eyebrows rose a fraction, but he nodded politely. "Of course, madam. Will he be requiring a room?" Daniel nearly choked. "A room." Eleanor studied him. She hadn't decided yet how far she was willing to go, but seeing the way Daniel's eyes darted around, hungry yet cautious, she made a choice. "Yes, prepare the east guest room." Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, I mean thank you, but I can't. I don't want to take your..." Eleanor cut him off. "You'll be staying here. It's safer. And if you're to teach my daughter properly, you'll need stability." Every eye shifted to Daniel. He sat up straighter, refusing to shrink. "Good morning," he said evenly. The board members exchanged glances. One laughed softly. Another muttered, "Is this a joke?" Eleanor's voice cut through. "This is Daniel. He's Emily's tutor. He will be present in my home. That's all you need to know." But one board member, sharp-eyed man named Grayson, leaned forward. "A tutor? He looks barely older than the child. Where did you find him?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "That isn't your concern." Daniel felt the heat of their stares. He wanted to sink into the chair, disappear, but instead, he opened his notebook. On the page was a problem Emily had struggled with, dividing decimals. Without thinking, he picked up a pen and began to explain aloud. His voice steady. By the time he finished, even the board members were silent. Grayson cleared his throat. "Well, impressive, I suppose." The call moved on, but Eleanor caught the flicker of pride in Daniel's eyes. He hadn't just survived their scrutiny, he'd proved himself. When the meeting ended, Eleanor leaned across the desk. "You held your ground," she said softly. "That was your first test, and you passed." Daniel let out a shaky laugh. "I thought I was going to throw up." Eleanor almost smiled. "Almost you didn't. That's what matters." For the first time, she wondered if this boy might not just belong in her home, he might belong in her world. It didn't take long for cracks to appear by the end of Daniel's first week in the mansion. Emily was thriving. She begged for math lessons morning and night. She laughed more. She even started asking to read books without her tablet glowing in her hands. But not everyone was celebrating the staff. Polite on the surface, grew colder each day. The chef complained about missing fruit. The maid muttered that Daniel tracked dirt through the hallways. The butler, most vocal of all, cornered Eleanor one evening as she returned from a meeting. "Madam," he began stiffly, "I must speak plainly. This boy, Daniel, he does not belong here." Eleanor set down her briefcase, explained. The butler's jaw tightened. "He is unvetted. He is unsuited to your household, and it is improper for a Hastings heir to spend her education on someone plucked from the street. The board already whispers, the neighbors notice, and the staff are unsettled." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "Are you unsettled?" The butler bowed his head slightly. "Madam, I am concerned for your reputation and your daughter's future." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she said, in a tone that ended the conversation, "Daniel stays." But though the butler withdrew, his disapproval lingered. That same night, Daniel overheard two maids in the corridor. "Can't believe she lets him eat at the table. He'll steal something. You wait and see. Boys like that don't change." Daniel stood frozen, notebook in hand. It wasn't as if their words surprised him. He'd heard worse before, on the streets, in shelters. But here, in this mansion where he was trying to prove himself, that cut deeper. When Emily bounced up later, asking for another story from the library, Daniel forced a smile. But inside, the doubt had started to creep back. Maybe they were right. Maybe he didn't belong here. The fracture widened 2 days later. Eleanor hosted a dinner with several investors. The table glittered with crystal glasses, golden candlelight, dishes plated like art. Daniel was told firmly to stay in his room, but halfway through the meal, Emily slipped away and dragged him down anyway. "Come on," she whispered. "You should meet them." Before he could protest, he was standing in the dining room, 12 sets of eyes fixed on him. Grayson, the board member who had challenged him before, set down his glass. "Well, the famous tutor." His tone dripped with disdain. "Tell me, boy, what qualifies you to sit in this house?" The room fell silent. Eleanor's lips pressed into a line, but she didn't speak. She wanted to see what Daniel would do. Daniel swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to back down, to retreat, but Emily squeezed his hand under the table. He lifted his chin. "I don't have qualifications," he said steadily. "I don't have a degree, or fine clothes, or a family name, but I know how to learn, and I know how to teach." That's enough for Emily. It should be enough for anyone. The room was still. Then, to Daniel's shock, one of the investors chuckled. "Bold, I like him." But Grayson's eyes were cold. "This will not end well," he murmured to Eleanor as the boy left the room, and for the first time, she wondered if he might be right. It happened on a Thursday. The day had begun well enough. Daniel spent the morning with Emily in the library, teaching her fractions with playing cards. She giggled every time she beat him at math poker, proudly announcing, "That's 3/4 bigger than your hand." But by afternoon, the storm hit. Eleanor was in the city, meeting with investors. The staff moved briskly about their duties, pointedly ignoring Daniel as usual. He tried not to care. He had learned to disappear when adults were hostile. That was, until the butler intercepted him outside the pantry. "Young man," the butler said, voice cold as steel, "you were not to loiter in the servants' quarters." Daniel flushed. "I wasn't. I was just." The butler's eyes darted to his backpack. "What's in there?" "My notebook," Daniel said, clutching it tighter. The butler's stare lingered, full of suspicion. "For everyone's sake, I suggest you remember where you came from. Don't imagine this house is yours." Daniel said nothing, but his ears burned as he walked away that evening. Disaster struck. Emily had left her bracelet, a delicate thing of pearls and diamonds, a gift from her late grandmother, on the library desk. By nightfall, it was gone. The house erupted. Staff searched high and low. The butler stood rigid in the center of the storm, gaze fixed on one suspect only. "Daniel, double quotes, I knew it," he declared. "The boy has sticky fingers. It's what street children do." Daniel's chest clenched. "I didn't take it." But the whispers spread quickly. The chef muttered darkly. The maids smirked. Even the chauffeur shook his head. By the time Eleanor returned, the house was thick with accusation. She walked in to find Daniel standing in the foyer, red-faced and trembling, as the butler held up his worn backpack. Inside, nestled between the notebook and a library card, was Emily's bracelet. Daniel's breath caught. "What? No, that's not Ty didn't." The butler's voice rang triumphant. "Caught red-handed." Emily burst into tears. "Daniel wouldn't steal from me." But Eleanor's face was unreadable, her eyes sharp as glass, fixed on the boy. "Daniel," she said quietly, "tell me the truth. Did you take it?" "I swear I didn't." His voice cracked. "I don't know how it got there." Silence. The staff watched, smug and satisfied. Emily sobbed, clinging to Daniel's arm. And Eleanor turned away. "Enough, Daniel, pack your things." The words sliced through him like a blade. He wanted to fight, to scream, to beg, but the weight of every doubt, every whisper, every look of disdain came crashing down. His throat closed, his eyes burned. He didn't argue. He just nodded, shoulders shaking, and walked upstairs for the first time since she'd met him. Eleanor didn't stop him that night. As Daniel left the mansion under the cold gaze of the butler, Eleanor stood alone in her study. She stared at the empty bracelet box on her desk, placed there before she'd left that morning. Before the chaos had unfolded, her chest tightened. Something didn't add up. But by then, Daniel was already gone. Daniel spent the night in the park, the same park where he had first met Emily. The bench was hard, the wind biting, but it wasn't the cold that hurt him most. It was the memory of Eleanor's voice, cool and final. Pack your things. He'd thought he'd finally found a place, a family, a chance, and just like that, it was gone. He pressed his face into his notebook, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Meanwhile, back in the mansion, Emily refused to eat. She sat at the dining table, eyes red, arms crossed tightly. The chef tried to tempt her with chocolate cake. The maid brought warm milk. The butler tutted about tantrums. But Emily didn't budge. Daniel didn't steal, she whispered. I know he didn't. Eleanor, watching from the head of the table, said nothing. But her daughter's certainty gnawed at her. That night, she entered the library alone. She scanned the desk, the bookshelves, the corners, and then she noticed something: the gap between the armchair and the rug. Just wide enough for something small to slip beneath. She crouched, reached, and pulled it out. The bracelet. Her stomach dropped. Daniel had told the truth. The next morning, Eleanor summoned the butler. She placed the bracelet on the desk between them, explained. The butler's eyes flickered just for a moment, before his composure snapped back into place. I don't know how that got there. Eleanor's voice was low, dangerous. Don't lie to me. The butler straightened his spine. Madam, with respect, I acted in the house's best interest. The boy is a liability. I merely encouraged his removal. Her jaw clenched. You planted it. Better one boy. Gone, the butler said stiffly. Then your reputation ruined. Eleanor rose slowly, her eyes burning. Get out, madam. Out. You are dismissed permanently. For the first time in 20 years of service, the butler's face cracked with shock, but Eleanor didn't waver. He left in silence. Emily burst into her mother's office moments later, having overheard the argument. You found it, didn't you? Eleanor crouched down, brushing her daughter's hair back. For once her voice softened. Yes, he didn't take it. Emily's eyes lit with fierce determination. Then we have to find him. We have to bring him back. Eleanor hesitated. She was not a woman who admitted mistakes easily, but the image of Daniel's trembling voice, insisting he hadn't stolen, replayed in her mind, and for the first time in years, Eleanor Hastings felt ashamed. She straightened. Get your coat. We're going to the park. That same afternoon, Daniel sat slumped on the park bench, watching other kids chase a soccer ball. His stomach growled. His heart ached. He thought about leaving the city, starting fresh somewhere else. Maybe this was his sign. He didn't belong in that world, and he never would. Then he heard it. Daniel. He turned. Emily was running toward him, hair flying, her coat flapping open. Behind her, Eleanor approached, heels clicking on the pavement. Emily threw her arms around him. We found the bracelet. You didn't do it. You didn't. Daniel blinked, stunned. What? Eleanor stopped a few feet away, her face unreadable. For a long moment she simply looked at him. Then, in a voice quieter than he'd ever heard from her, she said, I was wrong. The words hit harder than any accusation. Daniel stared, trying to process. Eleanor Hastings, billionaire, untouchable, unflinching, was admitting fault. To him she continued, her tone steady but softer than before. You told me the truth, and I didn't believe you. That was my failure, not yours. Daniel's throat tightened. So, what happens now? Eleanor extended her hand. You come home. For the first time, she called it home. And Daniel, heart-hammering, reached for her hand. When Daniel stepped back into the Hastings mansion, everything felt different. It wasn't that the chandeliers shone brighter or the carpets looked softer. It was the way Emily beamed, as if the sun itself had returned with him. It was the way Eleanor didn't walk ahead of him, but beside him. But not everyone welcomed him back. The staff, stripped of the butler's stern authority, still muttered among themselves. The chef scowled when Daniel entered the kitchen. The maids whispered behind his back. To them, his return was proof of Eleanor's folly. Daniel felt the weight of their stares. He wanted to shrink again, to disappear, but this time he didn't, because Emily clung to his side, and because Eleanor, though not outwardly warm, made her position unmistakably clear. Daniel is part of this household, she announced at breakfast the next morning. Anyone who cannot accept that is free to leave. Silence. Then, slowly, the whispers died. Weeks passed. Daniel resumed tutoring Emily, but it wasn't just numbers and words anymore. He taught her chess, strategy, and patience. She taught him piano, filling the library with halting but cheerful music. The cheerful music. The change in Emily was unmistakable. She laughed more, spoke with confidence, and most shocking of all, no longer clung to her tablet at every moment. But the greater change was in Eleanor. At first, she simply observed. She stood in the doorway, watching her daughter thrive under Daniel's guidance. But gradually, she began to soften. One evening, she found Daniel at the dining table, bent over his notebook. "What are you working on?" she asked. He startled, then pushed the paper toward her. "Geometry. Stuff I never finished learning." She studied his handwriting, messy but determined. "You're teaching yourself," he nodded. "If I'm going to keep teaching Emily, I have to keep learning, too." For the first time in years, Eleanor smiled small, almost reluctant, but real. "That," she murmured, "is exactly how I built my company." Daniel blinked. But you went to the best schools." "I dropped out," she interrupted. "Twice. Nobody handed me this life. I clawed for it, alone." Her eyes softened, just slightly. "You remind me of myself." Daniel stared, stunned, and for the first time, he saw Eleanor not as a cold, untouchable billionaire, but as a woman who had once been young, desperate, and hungry for something better. The outside world, of course, took notice. Rumors spread. The press caught wind of the mysterious boy living in Hastings Manor. Some speculated he was a cousin, others whispered scandal. Grayson, the board member who had always doubted, seized the chance to stir unrest. At the next meeting, he sneered across the polished table. "Eleanor, this is unacceptable. A street boy as your daughter's tutor as your protege. What will investors think?" Eleanor's gaze was ice. "They will think I recognize potential when I see it." Grace's lips curled. "Potential, he is nothing. He is no one." And before Daniel could shrink, Eleanor leaned forward. "Then watch closely, because one day you'll answer to him." The board fell silent. Daniel's chest burned with something he had never felt before. Not shame, not fear, pride. From that day forward, things shifted. The staff no longer muttered. Investors grew curious. And Daniel, for the first time, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't an outsider anymore. But what none of them knew was that the world wasn't done testing them, because with the spotlight on the Hastings family, Daniel's past, the one he thought he'd left behind, was about to come crashing back. It started on a gray Monday morning. Daniel was walking home from the library with Emily, both of them laughing over a riddle she had managed to solve before him. For once, he felt light, normal, almost like a regular kid. Then he saw him, a man leaning against the mansion's outer gate, unshaven, tattered jacket, sharp eyes that flickered with recognition. Danny. The laughter froze in Daniel's throat. He hadn't heard that name in 2 years. The man pushed off the gate, a crooked grin spreading across his face. "Well, I'll be damned. It is you." Emily blinked. "Daniel, who is that?" Daniel's hands trembled, his stomach dropped. My brother." The boy who had once slept on park benches and dug through trash for meals suddenly wasn't the same Daniel Emily knew. He was tense, guarded. The man, older by maybe 6 or 7 years, swaggered closer. "Don't look so scared, kid. I just wanted to see how my little brother turned into this." He gestured at Daniel's neat clothes, his polished shoes, the towering mansion behind them. Eleanor appeared at the door, instantly sensing the tension. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Name's Ryan. Daniel's family. His real family." The words cut Daniel like glass. Real family. He felt Emily squeeze his hand tightly, as if to anchor him that night. Ryan sat in Eleanor's study, nursing a cup of coffee he hadn't asked permission to pour. "I raised him, you know," Ryan said casually, "after Mom bailed and Dad. Well, you know how he was. I kept Danny alive. I taught him how to hustle, how to survive." Daniel sat on the edge of his chair, silent, his fists clenched in his lap. He remembered the lessons. Stealing from corner stores, sleeping in abandoned houses, running when the cops came. Eleanor's voice was cool. And now Ryan leaned back. "Now I'm thinking my little brother owes me. He's living in a palace while I'm stuck on the streets. Doesn't seem fair, does it?" Daniel's chest tightened. He knew what Ryan wanted. Money, a ticket out, and if he didn't get it, he'd drag Daniel's name through the mud. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "If you've come here to threaten him, you'll regret it." Ryan chuckled darkly. "Relax, lady. I'm not here to make trouble. I'm just saying, family looks out for each other." His eyes flicked to Daniel. "Don't they, Danny?" Daniel swallowed hard. He felt the old fear, the weight of loyalty twisted into chains. Emily, standing in the corner, whispered fiercely, "You don't have to listen to him, Daniel." And for the first time, Daniel realized he had a choice. That night, he couldn't sleep. Ryan's voice echoed in his head. "You owe me." The memories clawed back: hunger, cold, and his brother's shadow always leading him into darker places. But then he heard another voice, Emily's, soft but steady. "You don't have to listen." Daniel sat up in bed. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving. He was standing at a crossroads. He could give in to the past, or he could fight for the future Eleanor and Emily had given him. And deep down, he knew Ryan wasn't going to leave quietly. The battle for Daniel's place in the Hastings family had only just begun. Ryan didn't disappear at first. He hung around the gates, smirking at the guards who refused to let him in. Then he started following Daniel when he walked to the library with Emily, trailing at a distance like a shadow he couldn't shake. And finally, one evening he made his move. Daniel had slipped out to the park alone, notebook in hand. He wanted to clear his head, to escape the heavy silence that had settled between Eleanor and himself ever since Ryan arrived. He barely had time to sit when Ryan dropped onto the bench beside him. "Nice place you've got now," Ryan said, eyeing the notebook, private tutors, fancy clothes. "Must be nice to forget where you came from." Daniel didn't look at him. "I didn't forget." Ryan leaned closer, his voice sharp. "Then you know you owe me. You think you'd be alive without me. I kept you fed. I kept you safe." Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered nights when Ryan had indeed shared his last crust of bread, but he also remembered the shouting, the fists, the times Ryan shoved him into stealing things he didn't want to. Ryan lowered his voice to a hiss. "You're gonna get me in that house, Danny. You're gonna talk to your rich lady and make sure she helps me out. Or," Daniel finally looked at him, "or what?" Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Or I tell the world exactly who you are, where you come from, what you've done." The words hit like a punch. Daniel's throat closed. His past wasn't just ugly, it was dangerous. If the press learned about the things Ryan had dragged him into, it wouldn't just ruin him. It could ruin Eleanor and Emily. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rattled the leaves overhead. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I'm not scared of you anymore." Ryan blinked, taken aback. "What?" Daniel stood, notebook clutched tight. His voice shook, but his words didn't falter. "You used me. You dragged me down with you, but I have a family now. People who actually care about me. And I won't let you take that away." Ryan's grin faltered into a scowl. "You think that Ice Queen cares? She's using you, Danny. The second you mess up, she'll throw you back where you came from." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then why did she fight to bring me back?" Ryan froze. For the first time, he had no comeback. Daniel turned and walked away, heart hammering. For the first time in his life, he had stood up to his brother. But he knew, Ryan, he wasn't done, and the next move would be his. Back at the mansion, Eleanor was waiting. She'd been watching Daniel more closely than he realized. "You saw him again," she said quietly when he entered. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Her eyes softened, just slightly, and Daniel took a deep breath. "He wants in. He wants money, but I told him no." For the first time, Eleanor allowed a flicker of pride to cross her face. "Good, because Daniel," she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "You don't owe him your future just because you shared his past." Daniel blinked. The weight of those words settled deep in his chest. But he also knew Ryan wasn't the type to accept no, and when Ryan made his next move, it wouldn't just test Daniel. It would test all of them. It happened on a stormy night. Rain lashed against the Hastings mansion windows, thunder rolling in the distance. Daniel sat in the library with Emily, working on her reading. For a moment, life felt normal again, safe. Then the alarm sounded. The guards shouted outside, their voices drowned by the storm. Emily jumped, clutching Daniel's arm. Moments later, the butler rushed in, pale as chalk. "There's been a break-in." By the time Eleanor reached the foyer, the intruder was already inside. Ryan, his clothes were soaked, his hair plastered to his face, but his eyes gleamed with wild determination. In his hand was a crowbar, lifted more for show than attack. "Danny," he shouted, his voice echoing off marble. "You're coming with me, now." Daniel froze. The boy who had once obeyed every order, every demand, felt that old fear flooding back. His body screamed to run, to hide, but then he felt Emily's hand gripping his small but steady, and Eleanor, her figure tall and unflinching at the top of the staircase, spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No, he's not yours anymore." Ryan snarled, "You think money makes him yours? He's my brother." Daniel's heart pounded. He took a step forward, rainwater dripping from Ryan's crowbar. His voice shook, but his words were iron. "You're right. You're my brother, and I'll always remember what we went through. But you don't get to control me anymore." Ryan's eyes flickered, a mix of anger and disbelief. "After everything I did for you," Daniel's chest tightened, but he to push the words out. "You didn't save me. You kept me trapped, and I'm done being trapped." For a long, terrible moment, the storm filled the silence. Then Eleanor spoke, her tone colder than steel. "You will leave this house tonight, or I will make sure you never set foot near Daniel again." Ryan looked between her and Daniel, rain dripping from his chin. His grin was gone. His bravado cracked with a curse. He hurled the crowbar to the floor. The guard surged forward, but Eleanor lifted a hand. Ryan spat on the marble, turned, and stormed into the night. When the doors slammed shut, Daniel's knees gave out. Emily threw her arms around him, sobbing with relief. Eleanor moved closer, kneeling to meet his eyes. "You chose," she said, softly, "and you chose right." Daniel swallowed hard. "But he's still my brother." Eleanor's expression softened, a rare warmth breaking through. She rested a hand on his shoulder. "Family isn't just who you're born to, Daniel. It's who stands beside you when the storm comes." Daniel's chest burned, but this time it wasn't fear. It was belonging. Months later, the headlines would spin. "Billionaire adopts street boy who saved her daughter." Reporters hounded for details. Investors whispered. But inside the Hastings estate, none of it mattered, because in the library, sunlight streaming across polished wood, Daniel sat with Emily at the table, two notebooks open, two pencils scribbling, side by side. And when Eleanor stepped into the room, Daniel didn't flinch. He smiled. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He wasn't just a shadow of his past. He was home.